The laughter from the living room cut through my concentration like a knife through butter. I'd been trying to focus on quarterly reports for my security consulting firm, but Sophie's voice kept drifting through the thin walls of our split-level house in Millbrook, Connecticut. What started as casual conversation had escalated into something that made me freeze. "He'll cry first, definitely." Sophie's voice carried clearly through the house, followed by her friend Jenna's encouraging giggle. I pushed back from my desk, the leather chair creaking in protest. 20 years of marriage, and I'd never heard my wife sound so calculating. The way she said, "He'll cry," like she was discussing the weather forecast, made something twist in my gut. What if he fights it, though? Jenna's voice was equally clear now that I'd stepped into the hallway. "Then he'll beg me to stay," Sophie replied, with absolute confidence. "Trust me, I know him better than he knows himself. David's always been weak when it comes to confrontation." Their laughter echoed through the house again, and I found myself frozen halfway between my office and the kitchen. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, but my face remained completely expressionless. 23 years in security work had taught me to control my reactions, even when everything inside was screaming. "And then?" Jenna pressed, clearly enjoying this conversation. "Then he'll sign whatever I want just to end it," Sophie said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "Men like David always do. They can't handle the drama, so they just give in to make it stop." I heard movement in the living room, footsteps on the hardwood floor. "Show me the face again," Jenna said. The sad, disappointed wife face. "Like this?" Sophie's voice took on a completely different tone, soft and wounded. "David, I just can't do this anymore. Our marriage is destroyed, and we both know it." "Perfect," Jenna clapped. "You should win an Oscar for that performance." "I've been practicing in the mirror," Sophie admitted, her voice back to its normal, conspiratorial tone. "The key is to look heartbroken but determined, like I'm doing this for both of us." My mouth had gone completely dry. I wanted to storm in there, to confront them both, to demand answers. But something held me back. Maybe it was professional instinct, or maybe it was 20 years of marriage teaching me when to listen and when to act. "When are you going to do it?" Jenna asked. "Next Friday, at his birthday dinner." Sophie's voice was matter-of-fact, like she was planning a grocery list. "I figured maximum impact, in front of his sister and parents. He won't be able to make a scene with family watching." "Brutal, but effective," Jenna agreed. "He'll be so humiliated he'll agree to anything." They high-fived. I actually heard the slap of their palms meeting, celebrating the destruction of my marriage like they'd just scored a touchdown. "The timing is perfect, too," Sophie continued. "His business has been struggling since the Henderson contract fell through. He'll be desperate to avoid any more public embarrassment." She was right about the Henderson contract. Losing that deal had cost me nearly $40,000 and 2 potential clients who got spooked by the rumors, but hearing her weaponize my professional struggles against me felt like a physical blow. "What about the house?" Jenna asked. "Community property state," Sophie replied smugly. "Plus, I've been documenting every penny he spends on that stupid boxing gym membership and his weekend fishing trips. Wasteful spending, The judge will see right through his irresponsible financial management." The boxing gym. 3 times a week at Murphy's gym, working out with guys who'd become some of my closest friends over the past 5 years. She was going to use that against me, too. "You've really thought this through," Jenna said admiringly. "I've been planning this for 8 months, Sophie admitted. "Ever since he forgot our anniversary. That's when I realized he'd completely checked out of this marriage." 8 months. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks trying to rebuild my client base after the Henderson disaster, she'd been plotting my downfall. The anniversary thing stung because it was true. I'd been so buried in work that I'd completely forgotten until she mentioned it 2 days later. I'd apologized, bought flowers, taken her to dinner at that expensive Italian place she loved. Apparently, It hadn't been enough. The best part is, he has no idea it's coming, Sophie continued. He still brings me coffee in bed every morning like nothing's wrong. Still asks about my day, still tries to plan little weekend trips. It's almost pathetic how clueless he is. That coffee routine had been our thing for 15 years. Every morning at 7:15, French roast with a splash of cream, served in the blue ceramic mug her mother had given us as a wedding gift. I'd kept it up even during the worst of my business troubles, even when I was stressed about making payroll for my 3 employees. Men are so predictable, Jenna said with a laugh. They never see it coming until it's too late. The lawyer says I should get at least 60% of everything, Sophie said. Maybe more if I can prove he's been hiding assets. Have you found any evidence of that? Not yet, but I'm working on it. I've been going through his computer files when he's at the gym. There's got to be something. She'd been spying on me, going through my business files, my personal documents, looking for ammunition to use against me in court. The violation felt worse than the planned divorce itself. I forced myself to move, to continue toward the kitchen, as if I was just getting water like I'd originally planned. My hands were steady as I filled a glass from the tap, but my mind was racing through implications and possibilities. The rehearsal dinner story is genius too, Jenna was saying as I stood at the kitchen sink. Telling everyone he's been distant and uncommunicative, that you've tried everything to save the marriage. People eat that stuff up, Sophie agreed. Poor Sophie, trying so hard to hold her family together while her husband buries himself in work and ignores her emotional needs. What about Emma? Jenna asked, referring to our 17-year-old daughter. She'll understand eventually, Sophie said dismissively. Teenagers are resilient. Besides, she spends most of her time at college prep activities anyway. The divorce won't really affect her daily life. Emma, my little girl who still asked me to help with calculus homework and who'd inherited my dry sense of humor. Sophie was planning to blow up our family, and she thought Emma would just bounce back like nothing happened. I should probably head home, Jenna said. Mark will be wondering where I am. Thanks for helping me practice, Sophie replied. I feel so much more confident about Friday now. You're going to do great, Jenna assured her. He won't know what hit him. I heard them moving toward the front door, their voices growing fainter. The sound of the door opening and closing, Sophie's footsteps returning to the living room. I stood in the kitchen for another 5 minutes, drinking water I didn't want and staring out the window at our backyard. The swing set I'd built for Emma when she was 7 was still there, though she hadn't used it in years. The vegetable garden Sophie had insisted on planting last spring was overgrown with weeds now, abandoned like everything else in our marriage, apparently. When I finally returned to my office, I didn't sit down at my desk. Instead, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Peterson, Hale, and Associates. The receptionist answered on the second ring. This is David Mitchell. I need to speak with Tom Peterson immediately. It's urgent. I'm sorry. Mr. Peterson is in a meeting. Can I take a message? Tell him it's about divorce proceedings. Tell him I need to file today and I need papers served tomorrow. There was a pause. Hold please, Mr. Mitchell. Tom Peterson had handled the legal work when I'd incorporated my business 5 years ago. He was thorough, aggressive when necessary, and he understood the importance of timing in legal matters. David? Tom's voice came on the line. What's going on? I need to file for divorce before 5 o'clock today, I said without preamble. My wife is planning to ambush me at my birthday dinner on Friday, and I want to beat her to the punch. Slow down, Tom said. Tell me what happened. I gave him the abbreviated version, the overheard conversation, the 8 months of planning, the intention to humiliate me in front of family. Tom listened without interrupting, asking occasional clarifying questions. Do you have access to all your financial documents? He asked when I finished. Everything. Bank statements, business records, investment accounts, the house deed. I keep copies of everything in my office safe. Good. Connecticut is an equitable distribution state, not community property like your wife thinks. If we file first and present a comprehensive financial picture, we can control the narrative from the beginning. What about the house? Depends on how we structure the filing. If you can prove you've been the primary breadwinner and she's been planning this ambush for months, we might be able to argue for a more favorable split. There's something else, I said. We signed a prenup 20 years ago. She seems to have forgotten about it. Tom was quiet for a moment. Do you have a copy? In the safe, along with all the amendments we signed when I started the business. David, if that prenup is properly executed and covers your current assets, this changes everything. She might not be entitled to nearly as much as she thinks. Can you be here in an hour? I asked. I'll be there in 45 minutes. Start gathering every financial document you have. We're going to make sure your wife's little performance on Friday gets canceled due to lack of audience. After I hung up, I sat in my office chair and looked around the room that had been my sanctuary for the past 5 years. The walls were covered with certificates from security training programs, photos from company events, a framed copy of my business license. My diploma from the police academy hung next to a commendation I'd received for helping solve a corporate theft case 3 years ago. Sophie had always called this room my man cave, with barely concealed disdain. She'd wanted me to convert it into a guest bedroom, said we didn't need visitors staying in hotels when they came to visit. But this space had been mine, the one place in the house where I could think clearly and work without interruption. Now it was going to become my war room. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Tom Peterson arrived exactly 43 minutes later, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the kind of focused expression that made him one of the most successful divorce attorneys in Fairfield County. He was a small man with silver hair and sharp eyes, but I'd seen him dismantle opposing counsel in court with surgical precision. "Show me everything," he said without preamble. I opened the safe and began pulling out folders. 20 years of marriage generates a lot of paperwork, and I'd always been meticulous about record keeping, bank statements, investment accounts, business incorporation papers, tax returns, insurance policies, and finally, the prenuptial agreement we'd signed in 2003. Tom spread everything across my desk and began reviewing documents with the speed of someone who'd done this thousands of times. He made notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking questions about specific transactions or dates. "This prenup is solid," he said after reviewing the marriage contract. "It clearly states that business assets acquired after marriage remain separate property, and it includes a clause about spousal support that heavily favors the primary earner." "Sophie was making more money than me when we signed it," I explained. "She was a marketing manager at a pharmaceutical company, and I was just starting my security consulting business." "Ironic how things change," Tom observed. "According to these tax returns, you've been the primary breadwinner for the past 12 years. Her income from the marketing firm is less than half of what you bring in. She went part-time after Emma was born, then took a few years off completely. When she went back to work, she never really climbed back up the ladder." Tom nodded, making more notes. "The timing of her planned ambush actually works in our favor. We can argue that she's been deliberately deceptive, planning this for months while allowing you to continue supporting the household under false pretenses." "What about custody?" "Emma's 17, almost 18. In Connecticut, courts generally consider the preferences of children that age. Has your relationship with your daughter been good?" "Very good. I help with homework, drive her to activities, attend all her school events. Sophie's been distant with Emma lately, always on her phone or working late. We'll document that pattern. Now about serving the papers. You mentioned wanting them delivered at her workplace?" I felt a cold smile cross my face. "She was planning to humiliate me in front of my family. I think turnabout is fair play." "I like your thinking. We can have papers served at her office tomorrow during lunch. Maximum visibility. just like she was planning for you. Tom continued reviewing documents while I made copies of everything. The prenup, in particular, seemed to fascinate him. "This clause here," he said, pointing to a paragraph on page 3. "It specifically states that in the event of divorce initiated due to planning, deception, or deliberate emotional manipulation by either party, the injured party is entitled to additional compensation for emotional distress." I don't remember that part. Your wife probably doesn't either, but you have witnesses to her planning and deception. Her friend Jenna heard the entire conversation. If we can get Jenna to testify about what she witnessed. Jenna won't testify against Sophie. They've been best friends since college. Tom smiled. People's loyalties can shift quickly when they realize they might be called as witnesses in a messy divorce proceeding. Jenna has her own reputation to consider. We spent the next 2 hours preparing the filing. Tom's paralegal arrived with additional forms, and by 4:30, we had a complete divorce petition ready for submission to the Fairfield County Superior Court. "I'm driving this to the courthouse myself," Tom said. "We'll get a timestamp today, which establishes that you filed first. Then tomorrow, we serve her at work. What should I do tonight?" "Act completely normal. Don't give her any indication that you know about her plans. Let her think she's still in control. That's going to be difficult. You spent 23 years in security work, David. You know how to maintain operational security. Treat this like any other case." After Tom left, I sat in my office, staring at the copies of the divorce papers. My name was listed as the plaintiff, Sophie's as the defendant. 20 years of marriage reduced to legal terminology and asset division. I heard Sophie's car in the driveway at 6:15, right on schedule. She worked until 6 15-minute drive home, always walked through the door at the same time. Creatures of habit, both of us. "Hi, honey," she called out as she entered through the kitchen. "How was your day?" I walked out to meet her, forcing my expression to remain neutral. She looked the same as always, shoulder-length brown hair, blue eyes, still attractive at 38. But now I couldn't look at her without hearing that calculating tone in her voice, the way she'd laughed about my expected tears. "Fine," I said, "caught up on some paperwork. You?" "Oh, you know, same old office drama." She kissed my cheek like she had thousands of times before. "Jenna stopped by for lunch. We talked about weekend plans." The casual lie rolled off her tongue so easily. They hadn't talked about weekend plans. They'd talked about destroying my life. "Where's Emma?" I asked. "Study group at Jessica's house. She'll be home by 9. Sophie opened the refrigerator and began pulling out ingredients for dinner. "I was thinking about making that chicken pasta thing you like." "Sounds good." I watched her move around the kitchen, the same routine we'd followed for years. She hummed while she cooked, occasionally asking about my day or telling me about something that happened at work. To any outside observer, we looked like a perfectly normal married couple preparing dinner together, but I kept hearing her voice. "He'll cry, then beg, then sign whatever I want." "David," Sophie was looking at me with concern, "you seem distracted tonight." "Just thinking about the Henderson situation," I lied smoothly. "Tom Peterson thinks we might be able to recover some of the lost revenue through arbitration." "That's great news," she said, but I could hear the false note in her enthusiasm. She was probably thinking about how recovered revenue would affect her divorce settlement. Emma came home at 8:45, full of energy and complaints about her calculus study group. "Half the people there don't even understand derivatives," she said, dropping her backpack by the kitchen door. "I basically ended up tutoring everyone else." "That's because you inherited your father's math brain," Sophie said with a smile that looked genuine. "And his sarcastic attitude," Emma replied, grinning at me. "Mrs. Henderson says I have a dry wit that needs to be channeled constructively." "Mrs. Henderson clearly doesn't appreciate quality sarcasm," I said, earning a laugh from Emma. We spent an hour at the kitchen table going over her calculus homework. Emma was taking advanced placement classes, planning to major in engineering at UConn in the fall. She was smart, funny, and completely unaware that her parents' marriage was about to implode. "I'm going to be late tomorrow," Sophie mentioned as we were cleaning up. "Department meeting runs until 6:30. Another lie. I was certain she was meeting with her own lawyer, probably getting last-minute advice for her Friday ambush. "No problem," I said. "I'll pick up Emma from soccer practice." "Thanks. You're the best." She squeezed my shoulder affectionately. The casual manipulation was breathtaking. She was planning to humiliate me in front of my family in 3 days, and she was acting like we were the perfect supportive couple. That night, lying in bed next to her, I listened to her breathing become deep and regular as she fell asleep. 20 years of sharing a bed, and I knew all her sleep patterns. She always fell asleep on her right side, facing away from me. She'd move to her back sometime around 2 a.m., then wake up naturally around 6:30. Tonight, knowing what I knew, it felt like sleeping next to a stranger. Thursday morning proceeded exactly like every other morning for the past 15 years. I woke up at 6:45, started the coffee maker, and waited for the French roast to finish brewing. At 7:15, I carried Sophie's coffee upstairs in the blue ceramic mug, just like I had over 5,000 times before. "Morning," she mumbled, accepting the coffee with a sleepy smile. "You're an angel." "Sleep well?" I asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Like a baby." She took a sip and sighed contentedly. "This is why I married you, you know. Best coffee maker in Connecticut." If she only knew that in about 6 hours, she'd be receiving divorce papers at her office cafeteria in front of all her coworkers. "I'll be working from home today," I said. "Conference calls with potential clients." "That's great, honey. I hope one of them pans out." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I know how hard you've been working to rebuild after the Henderson thing." The Henderson thing. Like it was some minor setback instead of a financial disaster that had cost me months of sleep and nearly destroyed my business reputation. "I have a good feeling about today," I said, which was absolutely true, just not in the way she thought. Emma thundered down the stairs at 7:30, grabbed a granola bar and her soccer gear, and headed out to catch her ride to school. "See you tonight, Dad. Mom, don't forget I have practice until 5. "I'll pick you up," I called after her. Sophie left for work at 8:15, with her usual kiss on the cheek, and promised to call if her meeting ran late. I watched her Toyota Camry disappear down Maple Street, then immediately called Tom Peterson. "Everything's set," he reported. "Process server will be at her office at 12:30. I chose that time specifically because most office workers eat lunch between 12 and 1. "Her company has a cafeteria on the second floor," I said. "She always eats there on Thursdays because they serve that Asian fusion menu she likes." "Perfect. Maximum visibility just like you wanted." I spent the morning pacing around the house, unable to concentrate on anything productive. I tried reviewing client files, answering emails, even watching television, but nothing held my attention. Every few minutes I found myself checking the time. At 11:30, my phone rang. Sophie's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, honey," she said when I answered. "Just wanted to let you know the meeting definitely won't end until 6:30. Can you definitely get Emma?" "Already planned on it," I said. "You're the best. Love you." "Love you too," I replied automatically, though the words felt like ash in my mouth. 12:15, 12:20, 12:25. At 12:32, my phone rang. Tom Peterson. "Papers have been served," he said simply. According to our process server, she opened the envelope in front of approximately 15 co-workers in the company cafeteria. Her exact words were, "What the hell is this?" followed by several minutes of staring at the documents in apparent shock. How did she react? Quote, "She went completely white, started shaking, and tried to call someone multiple times. When the calls weren't answered, she gathered up the papers and left the cafeteria. Several co-workers were asking questions, but she didn't respond to anyone. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. She's been trying to call me. I haven't answered. Good. Let her panic for a few hours. It'll give her time to really understand what just happened. What's next? She'll probably contact a lawyer this afternoon if she hasn't already. By tomorrow, we'll start getting calls about settlement discussions. But David, you need to be prepared for her to come home angry. Very angry. I can handle Sophie. I'm sure you can. But document everything. If she makes threats, record them. If she tries to destroy property or hide assets, we need evidence. After Tom hung up, I sat in my office and waited. Sophie's first call came at 12:41, then 12:43, then 12:47. By 1 o'clock, she'd called 17 times. I let every call go to voicemail. At 1:15, she started texting. David, call me immediately. What is this supposed to mean? We need to talk right now. I can't believe you did this. Call me or I'm coming home. At 1:23, I'm leaving work. We're going to discuss this like adults. I heard her car in the driveway at 1:55. She'd broken several speed limits getting home, which was completely unlike her. Sophie was normally the most cautious driver I knew, always exactly at the speed limit, full stops at every sign. The kitchen door slammed open with enough force to rattle the windows. David, her voice echoed through the house. Where are you? I walked out of my office slowly, carrying a cup of coffee like I didn't have a care in the world. Sophie was standing in the kitchen, still wearing her work clothes, clutching the divorce papers in one hand and her phone in the other. Her face was flushed, her hair disheveled, and her eyes were blazing with fury. What the hell is this? She waved the papers at me. Divorce papers, I said calmly. I thought that was pretty obvious from the header that says, Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. Don't you dare get sarcastic with me right now. How could you do this? How could you humiliate me like that in front of everyone I work with? Humiliate you? I raised an eyebrow. That's interesting choice of words. The entire office saw me get served. People were staring, asking questions. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? Actually, I have a pretty good idea. I took a sip of coffee. Though I imagine it wasn't quite as embarrassing as you were planning to make my birthday dinner. Her face went completely white. For a moment, she looked exactly like she had in the cafeteria when she'd opened the papers. What are you talking about? She asked, but her voice had lost its edge. Really, Sophie? You're going to pretend you don't know what I'm talking about? I honestly have no idea what you mean. I set down my coffee cup and looked at her directly. He'll cry, then beg, then sign whatever I want. The color drained from her face completely. She actually took a step backward. You were listening, she whispered. Hard not to, considering how loudly you and Jenna were laughing about it. Sophie sank into one of the kitchen chairs, the divorce papers scattered across the table. David, I can explain. Explain what? That you've been planning this ambush for 8 months? That you were going to humiliate me in front of my family? That you've been going through my computer files looking for hidden assets? I kept my voice level, conversational. Which part needs explaining? We were just talking. It wasn't serious. Serious enough that you had it planned down to the facial expression you were going to use. What did Jenna call it? Oscar-worthy performance? Sophie's hands were shaking now. I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. For 8 months? David, please, we can work this out. We don't need lawyers and courts and all this legal mess. We can handle this between ourselves like adults. I almost laughed. You mean like you were planning to handle it on Friday, in front of my parents and sister? That kind of adult conversation? I wasn't really going to do that. Really? So when you told Jenna the timing was perfect because I'd be too humiliated to make a scene with family watching, that was just hypothetical? Sophie started crying. Real tears, not the rehearsed performance she'd practiced in the mirror. "I'm sorry. I was hurt and angry, and I said terrible things. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work on our problems." "What problems, Sophie? According to you, our marriage has been dead for months. You told Jenna I was pathetic and clueless. You said men like me always cave under pressure." "I didn't mean any of that." "Which part didn't you mean? The part where you were going to take 60% of everything? The part where you were documenting my wasteful spending on the boxing gym? Or the part where you said Emma would just bounce back because teenagers are resilient?" Each question hit her like a physical blow. She was sobbing now, mascara running down her cheeks. "The begging you expected?" I continued. "Not happening. The crying? Also not happening. And that signing whatever you want part?" I pulled a copy of our prenuptial agreement from my pocket and placed it on the table next to the divorce papers. "You might want to read this again, especially the part about deception and emotional manipulation." Sophie stared at the prenup like it was a snake. "We signed that 20 years ago. It doesn't mean anything now." Tom Peterson disagrees. "Apparently, it means quite a lot." "Tom Peterson? You went to Tom Peterson?" Her voice rose again. "He's the most ruthless divorce attorney in the county." "I learned from the best," I said. "You taught me that planning and timing are everything." Sophie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheek. "David, please. I know I screwed up. I know what I said was horrible. But we have 20 years together. We have Emma. That has to count for something." It did count for something. Right up until yesterday, when I heard you laughing about how pathetic and predictable I am. I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. Yes, you were. You were wrong about me crying, wrong about me begging, wrong about me signing whatever you wanted. And you were especially wrong about me being too weak to fight back. I picked up my coffee cup and started walking back toward my office. "Where are you going?" Sophie called after me. "To pack. I'm staying at the Hampton Inn until we can work out a custody schedule for Emma." "You're leaving?" "You wanted a divorce, Sophie. Congratulations. You're getting one." The Hampton Inn on Route 7 wasn't exactly luxury accommodations, but it had everything I needed: a clean room, reliable Wi-Fi, and most importantly, distance from Sophie's increasingly frantic attempts at reconciliation. I'd been there 3 days, and she'd called 47 times, sent 63 text messages, and even showed up at the hotel lobby twice before the desk clerk told her she couldn't harass guests. Emma knew about the divorce, of course. Sophie had told her Friday night, complete with tears and dramatic explanations about how Daddy had abandoned the family, without warning. But Emma was 17, not 7. And she'd heard enough arguments over the years to know there were two sides to every story. "Mom's been crying constantly," Emma told me when I picked her up for our Saturday afternoon together, "but she won't tell me what actually happened, just keeps saying you blindsided her." We were sitting in Murphy's gym, where I'd been spending most of my free time since leaving the house. The familiar sounds of boxing gloves hitting heavy bags and the smell of old leather and sweat were oddly comforting. "Your mother was planning to divorce me," I explained. "I just filed first." "Why were you getting divorced at all? I mean, you guys argued sometimes, but it never seemed that bad." "How do you explain to your teenage daughter that her mother had been planning to humiliate you in front of the entire family? That she'd spent months plotting and scheming while pretending everything was fine?" "Sometimes people grow apart," I said finally. "Your mother and I want different things now." "That's the same non-answer Mom gave me," Emma said with a frustrated sigh. "I'm not a little kid, Dad. I can handle the truth." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Tom Peterson. "Need to meet ASAP. Sophie's lawyer contacted us with settlement offer." "I have to handle some business," I told Emma. "Want to come with me to the lawyer's office, or should I drop you back at home?" "I'll come with you. Mom's been driving me crazy anyway, asking if you've said anything about reconciliation." Tom Peterson's office was in a converted Victorian house in downtown Millbrook, all dark wood and leather furniture designed to project serious legal authority. Emma waited in the reception area while Tom and I discussed Sophie's settlement proposal in his private office. "She's offering a 50-50 split of all assets," Tom said, sliding a folder across his desk. "House, investments, business equity, everything divided equally. What about the prenup? Her lawyer is claiming it's not enforceable due to the length of time that's passed and changes in our financial circumstances. They're also arguing that your business success was partly due to her emotional and domestic support during the marriage." I flipped through the settlement offer. "She wants half of my business?" "Half the equity value, yes, plus spousal support for 5 years and primary custody of Emma. Emma's almost 18. She'll be in college in 6 months. Symbolic more than practical, but it would give Sophie leverage in any future disputes." Tom leaned back in his chair. "The offer is actually pretty reasonable, David. In a contested divorce, you might end up paying more in legal fees than you'd save in assets. What about the emotional manipulation clause in the prenup? Hard to prove without witnesses, and Jenna isn't likely to testify against her best friend." I thought about that for a moment. What if Jenna wasn't Sophie's friend anymore? "What do you mean?" "What if Jenna had her own reasons to distance herself from Sophie?" Tom raised an eyebrow. "What kind of reasons?" "The kind that might come to light if someone started asking questions about certain financial irregularities at Sophie's company. David, I can't be party to any illegal activities. Nothing illegal. Just thorough research into public records and corporate filings. I'd spent 23 years in security consulting. I knew how to research people, how to find information that others preferred to keep private. And I'd never liked Jenna, even before she'd helped Sophie plan my humiliation." "Let me make some calls," I said. "Don't respond to the settlement offer yet." That evening, I sat in my hotel room with my laptop and began researching Jenna Martinez, Sophie's best friend and co-conspirator. Social media profiles, employment history, public records, court filings. It took 3 hours, but I found what I was looking for. Jenna had been sued twice in the past 5 years for defaulting on credit card debt. Her ex-husband had filed for bankruptcy in 2019, citing financial irresponsibility of spouse in the court documents. Most interesting, she'd been written up twice at work for inappropriate use of company resources and conflicts of interest in vendor relationships. I called my friend Mike Torres, who ran a private investigation firm in Hartford. "I need a background check," I said. "Full financial workup, employment history, any legal troubles." "This for a client or personal?" "Personal, very personal." "Send me the details. I'll have something for you by Monday." Mike's report arrived Monday morning via encrypted email. Jenna Martinez was in serious financial trouble. Credit cards maxed out, behind on her mortgage, car payment 3 months overdue. But most interesting was a pattern of expense account irregularities at her job. Restaurant charges that didn't match client meeting schedules, hotel bookings for business travel that couldn't be verified, vendor payments to companies that didn't seem to exist. I called Tom Peterson. "I think I know how to get Jenna to cooperate," I said. "I'm listening." "What if someone anonymously reported suspected expense account fraud to her company's HR department? And what if that same someone provided documentation of her financial troubles, suggesting she might be desperate enough to embezzle? That would probably trigger an internal investigation. And if Jenna thought Sophie had reported her, maybe because Sophie was angry about Jenna's role in the divorce planning, she might be willing to testify about what she witnessed." Tom was quiet for a moment. "That's ethically complicated, but not illegal." "No, not illegal, just ruthless. I learned from an expert." Tuesday morning, I sent an anonymous email to the HR director at Sophie's company, detailing Jenna's financial problems and suggesting they audit her expense accounts. I included copies of public records showing her debt problems and bankruptcy filing. Wednesday afternoon, Jenna called me. David, we need to talk. I'm not sure we have anything to discuss, Jenna. Yes, we do. It's about Sophie and the divorce and other things. What other things? Can we meet somewhere? This isn't a conversation for the phone. We met at a coffee shop in Westport, neutral territory where neither of us would be recognized. Jenna looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, nervous energy, constantly checking her phone. HR is investigating my expense accounts, she said without preamble. They think I've been embezzling. Have you been? Not embezzling exactly, but I've been creative with some of my business expenses. Nothing major, just padding things here and there when money was tight. Why are you telling me this? Because they think Sophie reported me. They said they received an anonymous tip about my financial problems, and Sophie's the only person at work who knows about my divorce and credit card issues. I sipped my coffee and waited. Did Sophie tell you to report me? Jenna asked. Sophie and I aren't exactly communicating these days. But you could have done it yourself. You have the skills to dig up that kind of information. I could have, I agreed. But why would I care about your expense account problems? Jenna stared at me for a long moment. Because you want me to testify about what I heard Sophie say, about her planning to divorce you. That would be helpful. If I testify, will you call off the investigation? I can't call off something I didn't start, but I might be able to provide evidence that your expense account irregularities were minor and unintentional, if that would help. You bastard, she said, but there was no heat in it. You set me up. I learned from the best. Sophie taught me that planning and timing are everything. Jenna was quiet for several minutes, staring out the coffee shop window at the traffic on the post road. She really hurt you, didn't she? She said finally. She tried to. But I don't stay hurt very long. I get even. What do you want me to say? The truth. What you heard, when you heard it, how long Sophie had been planning the divorce. Everything. And then you'll help me with the HR investigation? I'll provide a statement that you were manipulated by my wife into participating in her deception, and that any expense account irregularities were probably the result of financial stress from being used in someone else's marital drama. That's actually not far from the truth. The best lies never are. Thursday morning, Jenna Martinez gave a sworn statement to Tom Peterson detailing everything she'd witnessed and heard during Sophie's divorce planning sessions. The timing, the rehearsals, the calculated manipulation, the 8 months of deception. Thursday afternoon, Tom called Sophie's lawyer with a revised settlement offer. 30% of assets to Sophie, no spousal support, and joint custody of Emma with primary residence determined by Emma's preference. They'll never accept that, Tom warned me. They will, I said, because tomorrow Sophie's going to realize that her best friend has turned against her. Her co-workers all know she got served with divorce papers, and her carefully planned ambush has turned into a public humiliation. How can you be so sure? Because I know Sophie. She can handle being wrong, but she can't handle being embarrassed. And right now, she's more embarrassed than she's ever been in her life. Sophie's lawyer called Tom Peterson on Friday morning to accept our settlement terms. No negotiation, no counteroffer, just complete capitulation. Tom seemed almost disappointed that his carefully prepared legal arguments wouldn't be needed. She's also agreed to an expedited divorce, Tom reported. 60 days instead of the usual 6 months. Her lawyer says she wants to move forward with her life as quickly as possible. What changed her mind? Apparently, word has gotten around her office about the circumstances of the divorce filing. Plus, Jenna's testimony makes it clear that Sophie was planning deliberate deception and emotional manipulation. Her lawyer probably told her she'd lose badly if this went to court. I was sitting in Murphy's gym when Tom called, taking a break between rounds on the heavy bag. The physical exertion helped me think clearly, and I'd been doing a lot of thinking over the past week. There's one more thing, Tom continued. Sophie wants to meet with you directly. No lawyers, just the two of you. She says she wants to apologize. For what? She didn't specify. But David, I'd advise against it. Anything she says could potentially be used to reopen settlement negotiations. Where does she want to meet? Neutral location. She suggested the Starbucks on Main Street. I thought about it for a moment. Sophie had spent 8 months planning to humiliate me in front of my family. She'd rehearsed her performance, laughed about my expected tears, and calculated exactly how to maximize my embarrassment. But now she wanted to apologize? Set it up, I said. Tomorrow afternoon. David, I really think this is a mistake. Probably, but I want to hear what she has to say. Saturday afternoon, I arrived at Starbucks 15 minutes early and chose a table in the back corner where we could talk privately. Sophie walked in exactly on time, looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past 2 weeks. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual professional attire. She ordered a coffee and sat down across from me without saying anything for several minutes. You look tired, I said finally. I haven't been sleeping well. Her voice was quiet, subdued. Emma told me you're doing better. Emma talks to you about me? She's worried about you. She thinks you're angry. I'm not angry anymore. Sophie looked up at me with surprise. You're not? Anger is exhausting. I was angry for about 3 days, then I got busy. Busy destroying my life? Busy protecting myself. There's a difference. Sophie stirred her coffee absently. Jenna won't return my calls. I'm not surprised. Did you threaten her? I didn't have to. Jenna made her own choices, just like you did. The people at work won't even look at me anymore. They all know about the divorce papers, about how I got served in the cafeteria. They think I'm some kind of scheming witch who got what she deserved. Are they wrong? Sophie flinched like I'd slapped her. I guess I deserved that. You deserved a lot worse than that. We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching other customers come and go. Finally, Sophie looked at me directly. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry for planning to humiliate you. I'm sorry for the things I said to Jenna. I'm sorry for going through your computer files and trying to find ammunition to use against you. I'm sorry for all of it. Why? Why am I sorry? Why did you do it in the first place? 20 years of marriage, and you decided to blow it up with maximum cruelty. Why? Sophie was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee cup. I felt invisible, she said finally. You were so focused on work, on rebuilding after the Henderson contract fell through. You'd come home exhausted, barely talk during dinner, fall asleep watching TV. I felt like I was living with a stranger. So you decided to divorce me. I decided to hurt you the way you were hurting me. I wanted you to feel as small and insignificant as I felt. Mission accomplished. No, it wasn't. Because you didn't get small and insignificant. You got dangerous. I almost smiled at that. Dangerous? You outplanned me, outmaneuvered me, and made me look like a fool in front of everyone I know. You turned my best friend against me and destroyed my reputation at work. That's not the David I married. The David you married would have cried, then begged, then signed whatever you wanted. Remember? Sophie closed her eyes. I can't believe I said that. But you did say it. And you meant it. I thought I meant it. But when you actually filed for divorce, when I realized it was really happening, I panicked. I didn't want to lose you. I just wanted you to pay attention to me. Well, you got my attention. Not the kind I wanted. I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. She looked genuinely remorseful, but Sophie had always been good at projecting whatever emotion served her purposes. What do you want from me now? I asked. I want to know if there's any chance we could try again, go to counseling, work on our problems, maybe rebuild what we had. No. The answer came out flat and final, without any hesitation. Just like that? No discussion, no consideration? Sophie, you spent 8 months planning to humiliate me in front of my family. You rehearsed your performance in the mirror. You laughed about how pathetic and predictable I was. You can't come back from that. People make mistakes. Mistakes are forgetting anniversaries or leaving dishes in the sink. What you did was calculated cruelty. Sophie started crying again, but this time the tears looked real. I know I screwed up, she said. I know I hurt you in ways that can't be fixed. But we had 20 good years before everything went wrong. We had 20 years where I didn't know who you really were. This isn't who I really am. I was angry and hurt, and I did terrible things, but that's not the real me. I stood up and put on my jacket. Maybe not, but it's the you I'll remember. David, wait. I turned back to her. Emma's going to need both of us to get through this, she said. Can we at least try to be civil for her sake? I've never been anything but civil to you, Sophie. Even after I heard your little rehearsal, I brought you coffee in bed the next morning. I know. That makes it worse somehow. I'll always be civil to you. But we're done. The papers will be final in 60 days, and then we can both move on with our lives. What if I can't move on? Then that's your problem to solve. I walked out of Starbucks and didn't look back. 2 months later, the divorce was finalized. Sophie kept the house and her car. I kept my business and my investments. Emma chose to spend her senior year living with me in the small apartment I'd rented near her school. Mom's seeing a therapist, Emma told me one evening while we were making dinner together. She says she's trying to figure out why she did what she did. That's good, I said. Everyone should understand their own motivations. Do you think you'll ever forgive her? I already have forgiven her, but forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. What's the difference? Forgiveness means I'm not angry anymore. Reconciliation would mean trusting her again. Those are two very different things. Emma was quiet for a moment, stirring the pasta sauce. She asked me to tell you something, she said finally. What? She said to tell you that you were right. She did rehearse her divorce speech, and she did laugh about how you'd react. But she said the person who did those things isn't who she wants to be anymore. What did you tell her? I told her she should have thought about that before she did them. I looked at my daughter with pride. At 17, she already understood something that had taken me 20 years to learn. Actions have consequences, and some consequences can't be undone. 6 months after the divorce was final, I ran into Jenna at the grocery store. She looked better than she had during our coffee shop meeting, less stressed, more confident. How did the HR investigation turn out? I asked. They found some irregularities, but decided they were minor and unintentional. I had to pay back about $3,000, but I kept my job. That's good. I know you helped me with that. The statement you provided made a difference. You did the right thing by telling the truth. Sophie still won't speak to me. She thinks I betrayed her. Did you? Jenna considered the question. I testified about what I witnessed. If Sophie considers that betrayal, then maybe she shouldn't have put me in a position to witness it. Wise words. I learned them from watching what happened to her. Actions have consequences, even when you think nobody's paying attention. Especially then, I thought, but didn't say. A year later, Emma graduated high school as valedictorian and headed off to Yukon to study engineering. Sophie attended the graduation ceremony, but sat on the opposite side of the auditorium from me. We were polite when we spoke, but the conversations were brief and focused entirely on Emma. She's doing well, Sophie said after the ceremony, watching Emma pose for pictures with her friends. She is, I agreed. She's stronger than either of us were at her age. She gets that from you. She gets it from surviving our divorce. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Do you think she'll be okay? Long term, I mean? She'll be fine. Emma learned early that people aren't always who they pretend to be. That's a valuable lesson. Even when it's her own parents? Especially then. 2 years later, I sold my security consulting business to a larger firm and used the proceeds to start a new company focused on corporate fraud investigation. The work was more interesting, the clients were better, and the money was significantly better. Emma was thriving at college, maintaining a 3.8 GPA in mechanical engineering and dating a nice kid from her calculus study group. She called me every Sunday to catch up on news and occasionally mentioned that Sophie was doing well in therapy and had started dating someone new. "Are you okay with that?" Emma asked during one of our calls. "With your mother dating?" "Of course. I want her to be happy." Really? Sophie and I weren't right for each other, but that doesn't mean she's not right for someone else. You're not dating anyone. I'm not looking to date anyone. I'm focused on work and making sure you have everything you need for school. Dad, I'm 20 years old. I don't need you to sacrifice your personal life for me. I'm not sacrificing anything. I'm choosing to prioritize what matters most to me. Which is? Building something that can't be taken away by someone else's deception. Emma was quiet for a moment. You're still angry about what Mom did? No, I'm not angry. But I'm not stupid either. I learned who I can trust and who I can't. That's not anger, it's wisdom. 3 years after the divorce, I received an unexpected phone call from Sophie. "David, I need to tell you something." Her voice sounded different, calmer, more centered than I remembered. "What is it?" "I'm getting married." "Congratulations. Emma mentioned you were seeing someone. His name is Robert. He's a good man, patient, kind, nothing like—" She paused. "Nothing like how I remember us being toward the end. I'm happy for you, Sophie. I mean that. Thank you. But that's not why I called. Okay? I wanted to apologize again. Not the kind of apology I gave you at Starbucks, where I was still trying to manipulate the situation. A real apology. Sophie, we don't need to do this." "Yes, we do. I spent 3 years in therapy figuring out why I did what I did, and I owe you an explanation." I waited. "I was scared," she said. "Scared that you didn't love me anymore. Scared that I wasn't important to you. Scared that I was just existing in your life without mattering, so I decided to make myself matter by hurting you." That's quite an insight. It took me a long time to get there. But David, what I did to you was unforgivable. The planning, the rehearsing, the laughing about your pain, that was cruel in ways I didn't even understand at the time. I know. You deserved better. You deserved a wife who talked to you about her feelings instead of plotting against you. You deserved honesty instead of manipulation. Yes, I did. I can't undo what I did. But I wanted you to know that I understand now how deeply I betrayed your trust. And I wanted you to know that the person who did those things doesn't exist anymore. I'm glad to hear that. Are you? Really? I thought about it for a moment. Yes, I am. Not for my sake. We'll never be together again, and I've made peace with that. But for Emma's sake, and for your sake, I'm glad you figured out how to be a better person. Thank you for saying that. Sophie? Yes? Be honest with Robert. Whatever problems you have, whatever fears or insecurities, talk to him about them. Don't let them fester into something that destroys what you're building. I will. I promise. After we hung up, I sat in my office and thought about the conversation. Sophie sounded genuinely different. More mature, more self-aware, more honest about her own flaws. But it didn't change anything between us. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. 5 years after our divorce, Emma graduated from UConn with highest honors and got a job with an aerospace engineering firm in Seattle. At her graduation party, Sophie and I found ourselves standing together, watching our daughter celebrate with her friends. "She turned out pretty amazing," Sophie said. "She did, despite everything we put her through. Because of everything we put her through. Emma learned early that she couldn't depend on other people's relationships staying stable. So she learned to depend on herself. That's not necessarily a bad thing. No, it's not. But I wish she'd learned it some other way. I looked at Sophie, really looked at her for the first time in years. She was 43 now, with some gray in her hair and lines around her eyes that hadn't been there during our marriage. But she looked peaceful, content in a way I didn't remember her ever being when we were together. "You look happy," I said. "I am happy. Robert and I are good together. We talk about things instead of letting them build up into resentment." "I'm glad. What about you? Are you happy?" I considered the question. "I'm satisfied. My business is successful, Emma's thriving, I have good friends and interesting work. I'm not looking for anything more than that." "You should be looking for more than that. You should find someone who appreciates what a good man you are." "Maybe someday." "David?" "Yeah?" "I know this probably doesn't mean much coming from me, but you handled our divorce with more class and dignity than I deserved. You could have destroyed me completely, but you didn't." "I didn't want to destroy you, Sophie. I just wanted to protect myself." "You did both. And I've never forgotten that." Emma appeared beside us, flushed with excitement and champagne. "Are you two having a moment?" she asked with a grin. "We're having a conversation," I said, "about how proud we are of you." "Both of you?" "Both of us," Sophie confirmed. "Whatever mistakes your father and I made with each other, we got you right." Emma hugged us both, and for just a moment, we looked like a normal family celebrating a milestone. But appearances can be deceiving, as I'd learned the hard way. 10 years after our divorce, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Emma Mitchell and James Patterson were getting married in September, and they wanted both parents to walk her down the aisle. The wedding was beautiful. Emma looked radiant in her white dress, and James seemed like a genuinely good man who adored her. Sophie and I sat on opposite sides of the church during the ceremony, but we managed to be civil during the reception. "She chose well," Sophie said during the father-daughter dance, watching Emma laugh at something James whispered in her ear. "She learned to choose well," I corrected. "She learned to look past the surface and see who people really are." That's a hard lesson to learn, but a valuable one. Sophie was quiet for a moment. "Do you think she learned it because of what happened between us?" "Partly, but mostly she learned it because she's smart and observant, and she pays attention to how people treat others when they think nobody's watching. Like you did. Like I did." The DJ announced the last dance, and couples moved onto the floor. Sophie and I stood at the edge of the reception hall, watching Emma and James sway to the music. "I have something to tell you," Sophie said. "What?" "Robert and I are moving to Florida. He got a job offer in Tampa, and we've decided to take it." "That's a big change. A good change. A fresh start in a place where nobody knows our history." "When?" "Next month, after Emma gets back from her honeymoon." I nodded. It made sense. Sophie had rebuilt her life in Connecticut, but there would always be people here who remembered the divorce, the circumstances, the gossip. A fresh start might be exactly what she needed. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not making the divorce worse than it had to be. For being civil at Emma's graduation and today. For letting me be part of Emma's life without making it difficult." Emma needed both her parents. I wasn't going to let my feelings interfere with that. "Still, you could have made things much harder for me. You chose not to." "I chose to focus on moving forward instead of looking backward." Sophie smiled. "That's very philosophical. It's very practical. Revenge feels good in the moment, but it doesn't build anything lasting." "What did you build instead?" I looked around the reception hall at Emma and James, at the friends and family celebrating their new marriage, at the life my daughter had created for herself. I built a relationship with my daughter that's based on honesty and respect. I built a business that I'm proud of. I built a life that can't be destroyed by someone else's deception. That sounds lonely. It sounds secure. Sophie was quiet for a moment. I hope someday you find someone who makes security feel less important than connection. Maybe. But if I do, it'll be someone who earns that trust over time, not someone who asks me to give it blindly. The music ended, and Emma and James walked over to where we were standing. "Thank you both for being here," Emma said, hugging us each in turn. "It means everything to me that you could put aside your differences for today." "We didn't put aside our differences," I said. "We just remembered that some things are more important than our differences." "Like what?" "Like you." Emma teared up and hugged me again. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, kiddo." As the reception wound down and guests began to leave, Sophie approached me one last time. "This is probably the last time we'll see each other," she said. "With me moving to Florida and Emma starting her own life. Probably. I want you to know that I've never regretted the divorce. We weren't good for each other, and we both know it. But I've regretted every day how I handled it." "I know. Do you forgive me? Really forgive me? Not just say you do?" I thought about the question. Did I forgive her for the planning, the rehearsing, the laughing about my expected humiliation? Did I forgive her for the 8 months of deception, for going through my files, for trying to manipulate our daughter against me? "Yes," I said finally. "I forgive you. Thank you." "But Sophie." "Yes?" "Forgiveness doesn't mean I would ever trust you again. Those are two different things." She nodded. "I know, and I understand why." Sophie walked away, and I watched her go. 25 years after we'd first met, 10 years after our divorce, and we were finally being completely honest with each other. I stayed until the reception hall was empty, helping Emma and James gather gifts and leftover flowers. As we loaded everything into their car, Emma turned to me. "Are you okay, Dad? You seem thoughtful tonight. Just thinking about how much you've grown up. Seems like yesterday you were asking for help with calculus homework. I still ask for help with math. James is better at it than you are." Ouch. Replaced by a younger model. Emma laughed. Never replaced, just expanded. As I drove home that night, I thought about Sophie's question. Was I lonely? Maybe. But I was also free. Free from deception, free from manipulation, free from the constant worry that someone I trusted was planning to betray me. I'd built a good life in the 10 years since our divorce. A successful business, strong friendships, a relationship with my daughter that was based on mutual respect and honesty. I'd learned to be content with my own company, to find satisfaction in work well done, to appreciate simple pleasures without needing someone else to validate them. Maybe someday I'd meet someone who would make me want to risk that security for the possibility of connection. But if I did, it would be someone who understood that trust is earned slowly and lost instantly. Someone who knew that love without honesty is just elaborate self-deception. Someone who would never laugh in the next room while rehearsing how to break my heart. 15 years after our divorce, I received a phone call that I'd been expecting, but still dreaded. "Dad?" Emma's voice was shaky. "It's Mom. She had a heart attack." Sophie had died suddenly at 53, leaving behind her husband Robert and a life that seemed, by all accounts, genuinely happy. The funeral was in Tampa, and Emma asked if I would come. "You don't have to," she said. "I know it might be awkward." "I'll be there," I said without hesitation. The funeral was small. Robert's family, a few friends from their life in Florida, Emma and James and their 2 young children. I sat in the back of the church and listened to people talk about the Sophie they had known. Kind, generous, thoughtful, always ready to help others. It was strange hearing her described that way. The Sophie I had been married to was capable of kindness, but she was also capable of calculated cruelty. The Sophie who had died in Tampa seemed to have left the cruel part of herself behind in Connecticut. After the service, Robert approached me. "You must be David," he said, extending his hand. "Sophie talked about you." "I'm sorry for your loss," I said. "Emma tells me you made her very happy." "She made me happy too. We had 8 good years together." "That's more than some people get." Robert nodded. "She told me about your divorce, about what she did." I wasn't sure how to respond to that. "She said you had every right to hate her, but you chose not to. That meant a lot to her." "Hate takes too much energy," I said. "I preferred to spend mine on other things." "She said you were a good man who deserved better than what she gave you. We were wrong for each other. It happens." "Maybe." But she never forgave herself for how she handled it. After the funeral, Emma and I walked through the cemetery where Sophie was buried. The headstone was simple: Sophie Mitchell Patterson, beloved wife and mother. "Do you think she was happy?" Emma asked. "I think she learned how to be happy," I said. "That's not the same thing, but it's something." "Do you miss her?" "I miss the person she was when we first met, before everything got complicated." "What was she like then?" "Funny, spontaneous. She used to surprise me with little adventures, picnics in random parks, drives to nowhere in particular, late-night ice cream runs. She made ordinary moments feel special." "What changed?" "Life changed. We stopped talking and started assuming. We stopped being curious about each other and started taking each other for granted. By the end, we were living like strangers who happened to share a house." "Is that why she planned the divorce the way she did?" "Partly. But mostly she planned it that way because she was angry and wanted to hurt me. The reasons don't really matter now." We stood in silence for a few minutes, looking at the headstone. "I'm glad you came," Emma said finally. "Me too." "Are you okay? Really okay?" I thought about the question. Was I okay? I was 60 years old, successful in business, proud of my daughter and her family. I had good friends, interesting work, a comfortable life. But I was also alone, by choice, because I'd never met anyone who made the risk of vulnerability seem worth taking. "I'm okay," I said. "I'm not the same person I was when your mother and I were married, but I'm okay with who I became." "Who did you become?" "Someone who pays attention, someone who trusts carefully, someone who values honesty above everything else." That sounds like a good person to be. It's a safe person to be. On the plane back to Connecticut, I thought about the life Sophie had built after our divorce. By all accounts, she'd learned from her mistakes, become more honest with herself and others, found genuine happiness with Robert. She'd done the work to become a better person. But it didn't change what had happened between us. It didn't erase the planning, the rehearsing, the laughter at my expected humiliation. Some actions create permanent consequences, no matter how much the person who took them might change afterward. I'd forgiven Sophie years ago, but forgiveness had never meant forgetting. It had meant choosing not to let her actions define the rest of my life. 20 years after our divorce, I finally understood the difference between justice and revenge. Justice would have been Sophie facing the consequences of her actions, losing the marriage, losing her friend, losing her reputation. Revenge would have been me trying to destroy her completely. I'd chosen justice, and it had served me well. I'd protected myself without becoming the kind of person who takes pleasure in others' pain. I'd maintained my integrity while refusing to be victimized. Sophie had learned to laugh in the next room while planning my humiliation. But I'd learned something more valuable: how to recognize the sound of that laughter and what it really meant. Some lessons are worth the price you pay to learn them.